For our first Minitab practice problem for chi-squared, let's go to the reading for Chapter 11. Okay, so here we are at the chapter contents. And down here we see chi-square tests using Minitab. And here we have step-by-step instructions on how to do the chi-square for the auto loyalty file that you can download on D2L. This is the same data that we used in question 6 in the week 8 worksheet. Okay, so it downloads as a Excel file. Let's start by opening Minitab. And in Minitab, I'm going to click this Open icon, navigate to my Downloads folder, and open the Auto Loyalty file. Okay, let's look over here. It says that column 1 should be the population and column 2 should be likely to purchase. So I'm going to get rid of column A because individual owners are not important here. Okay, we still have column 1. So I'm going to click that header, right click, and delete those cells. Okay, before proceeding, I'm going to save this. All right, so what we had in class today was this worksheet, and you were given observed values. Here you actually have those individual account data. So each of these rows represents a participant, and then you have the car that they excuse me, the car that they own and whether they are likely to purchase again. Okay. So going back to the textbook. Step 1, select Stat. Go to Tables, Cross Tabulation, and chi-square. Okay. Step 4. So here we have raw data, right? Summarized is what we had in our worksheet, but what we have in this Minitab file is raw data. Rows, it says C2, columns, C1. Okay. We want to run a chi-square test. I'm also going to ask it to tell me what the expected frequencies are. Okay. And here is the output. Now if we compare this to what we did in class, you'll see that no and yes is flipped, but other than that we have an observed value and an expected value. All right, so 69 and 78, 120 and 124.8, 123 and 109.2, and so on. Okay, we've got 2 degrees of freedom. Our chi-square is 7.891, which is what we calculated when we did this by hand, also with 2 degrees of freedom. Because we're using lookup tables, all we were able to do is say that the p-value is less than 0.05 because that was the alpha we used, 0.05. Here we get a precise p-value of 0.018. Okay, so we just did this whole problem from the raw data. Now, how do you do this if you start with a table like the one you have here? Going back to our textbook, it tells us how to run a chi-square with summarized data. So we are going to, begin with a new Minitab worksheet and label column C1 through C3. Okay, so File, New Worksheet. Okay. C1. Nope, that's not what I want. Chevrolet Impala. Ford Fusion. Honda Accord. Okay, then we enter the observed frequencies of yes and no responses for each population in its corresponding column. Okay, so this says to do it in C1 through C3. I'm actually going to insert another column. Okay, so C1 is actually going to be my data labels. Yes and no. Okay, looking up here, in case you forget which number's which, it says cell contents count over expected count. So this is the actual observed value. All right, so we've got 69, 120, and 123. In no, we have 56, 80, and 52. Okay, so now we have a summary table like this, like the one we started with today. Okay, again, we are going to stat tables. And here we're told to choose chi-square test two-way table in worksheet, and that is not an option. This is the only one that starts with chi-square test, right? Chi-square test for goodness of fit is one variable, so that's not going to work for us. Let's do this one. Okay. So here we have summarized data in a two-way table. Columns containing the table. Select all our columns. Labels. Okay. Sure. And what do we get? Okay. Yes, no. 3 headers. Totals. All right, and the same chi-squared, degrees of freedom, and p-value we had earlier. All right, so now we've done the chi-square both from the raw data and from the summary table. Let's do another example from today's worksheet. We are going to do problem 1. Okay, so the one we just did was chi-square for independence. What we're going to do next is chi-square for goodness of fit. So let's create another worksheet. Okay, going up to problem 1. Here's what we did in class. So our categories are part-time, full-time, and unemployed. Okay, so we have observed frequencies. Of 45, 26, and 19. Our expected distribution, 56%, 20%, and 24%. Okay. Stat, tables, goodness of fit. Okay, category names. Okay, let's see what happens. This one's pretty cool. We'll look at that in a second. Okay, what did we get? Okay, observed, historical, test proportion, expected. Let's see. So 50.4, 18, 21.6. So these are the same ones that we found. Add them all up. And okay, so this column here is what we have in green over here as the proportion, or as the excuse me, contribution to that chi-square statistic. Add them all up. Same value we had before. We had degrees of freedom being 2 over here. Over here we see that it's also 2. Here we saw, using the 0.05 level of significance, that our chi-square was less than our critical chi-score, so we retained the null. Here we have a p-value of 0.108, which is greater than 0.05, so again we would retain the null. Alright, so we got the same answer as when we did it by hand. Now let's take a look at those graphs it spit out. Okay. Contributed value. Excuse me. Okay, so this is of the total chi-square output, how much came from each category. So how much did each category deviate from the expected frequency? Okay, I think this one is more informative. So here we have in orange the expected compared to the observed. Okay, let's, this one? Nope. Nope. There we go. Okay. 45, 26, 19. Okay, so these are absolute count values. So I'm going to say number of observations. Okay. Chart of observed and expected values. I'm actually going to cut this so I can change it and use that as my subtitle for my actual title of the chart. I want something that's more descriptive of the actual problem. So if we go back to the problem, this was our employment status of students example. So okay, I'm going to right click, add subtitle, paste what I cut earlier. Okay. Here we go. Expected. So expected frequency based on national averages. Whoa, that came out really tiny. Can I make that wrap? Okay, maybe I can't do that. I am still going to make that font bigger so we can see it. Still try and add in a little more information about what this is. Right click, add, say footnote. Sure. Okay, now we have lots of stuff in here. Now let's say that I had this chart and I was typing my report for the Minitab project. Alright, I'm going to close this so it doesn't accidentally paste into the wrong thing. Okay, so I have an open Word document. I'm over here, right click, send graph to Microsoft Word. Now if I go back to my Word document, I have this right here. So, good stuff. Alright, now I'm going to minimize this. Minimize all my worksheets. Okay, this one I'm not going to use, so I'm going to go ahead and close that and say no, I don't want to save it. Okay. Worksheets. So I have 3 worksheets in my project, so if I was going to submit this project file, I'd want to give them more useful names than just data worksheet 2, worksheet 3. So let's see which one is which. Worksheet 3 is the employment example. Worksheet 2 is the car summary table. Let's see, what did I call it on the other thing? Customer loyalty. Summary table, which means that this one is customer loyalty. Raw data. All right, so now those have different titles. If I go back to my session window, I can see all of the things I did. Let's open this up. Okay. So looking at this, there wasn't a lot that we did and then didn't use. The only thing that I deleted was this chart of contribution to the chi-square value by category. When you're doing your Minitab project, if you have a lot of errors, so you run something, you realize you're wrong, you run it again, go ahead and in the session window, you can delete that. It makes it easier for me to figure out what you're actually turning in when I'm grading your Minitab file. Okay, last thing I wanted to show you was going back to our customer loyalty example with this summary data table. How do we make a chart for this one? Okay, graph, bar chart, values from a table. We have a two-way table, right? We have a variable going this way and a variable going that way. So down here, we're going to go with cluster. Okay. Row labels, this one, graph variables. And let's see what we get. Okay. So here we see a comparison of the count data. So this would be number of customers. Now, something more useful would be the percentage of people who say yes versus people who say no, since we don't have an equal number of car owners in each category. So let's make percentages first. Okay. Going up to calc. Okay, and I'm going to store my result in this Chevy column. My expression is going to be this value divided by 69 plus 56. All right, so these two values. Okay. All right, so we get our percentages, but they're as decimals. I want them as percentage values, so I'm going to go back and edit that. So I'm going to multiply everything by 100. Okay, so it just moves that decimal place. All right, here I'm going to store it in Ford. My numerator is now the corresponding cell in this column. My denominator is now the sum of 120 and 80. We know that that's 200. That's a really easy one. We can just type it in as one number. Okay, and for Honda. Now we are storing in Honda. Our input column is Honda Accord. We are dividing by the sum of 123 plus 52. Okay. So let's try making that same graph with these data. Again, we are taking data from a table. It's two ways. We're doing cluster. Okay, our row labels are still C1. Graph variables, we're now doing these. Okay, so here we go. Now our y-axis is going to be percent of customers rather than number. And let's change this title. What else can we do to this graph to make it easier to read? I think if we made all the yeses one color and all the nos another color, that could be helpful. I'm going to choose this kind of muted red for no. Okay. Now again, if you want to add it to your Word document, you just right-click, send graph to Microsoft Word. And now it is in my Word file. Alright, so hopefully this video was helpful. If you would like to practice doing this, I recommend going through the problems that were in your Week 8 worksheet. You've got a total of 8 different chi-square problems in there. You can do them all in Minitab and then check your answers by comparing back to what you have on your worksheet. If you have any questions, please post them on D2L.